Hey, hey, hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. 'Tis the season. Today on rSpace, turns out the final girl was OP, running for his life after serving divorce papers. My wife tried to kill me after I surprised her with divorce papers. I made sure she'll be locked up for a long time. The fact that I'm here writing this right now means that my wife is a cheating hoe. It's sad, but it's the truth. I hate that fact so much, but I think knowing it for sure is a lot better than how it felt when I was just living with strong suspicions and plenty of anxiety. The only thing is, now that I know for sure, I need to know what my next move is going to be. That's the most important thing at this point. I don't know how necessary this is, but here's a little background. I, 28 male, have been married to my wife, 26 female, for 4 years now, and we dated for 2 years before that. We got married pretty early, at least by modern standards and the standards of the people I know, but it didn't really bother us. One thing that you need to know about my wife is that from very early on, I realized that she was weak, for lack of a better word. She's always been the kind of woman who can't stand the sight of blood, violence, and the sort. She essentially crumbles under a lot of emotional stress. She's a softie, but it was never really a deal breaker for me. It has been extremely annoying on many occasions since she's the kind who breaks down and cries after a hard day at work or after one of her coworkers was mean to her. I've got thick skin, so it can be irritating for her to fall apart over things that I wouldn't bat an eyelid at. Everyone is different though, and I acknowledge that from the very start. The truth is, I think I started to get used to it after some time. Or maybe she slowly became tougher and less of a snowflake. Isn't that how they use the term? When we got married, we moved to another town because I got a pretty good job over there, and she was working retail, so it wasn't a big deal for her to move. She did make a big fuss in moving away from where her mom was, since it was going to be an hour and a half instead of just 20 minutes away, but she eventually got over it after her mom talked to her. In the new town, we got a pretty nice apartment quickly, and I had enough saved up for us to get the place furnished without too much of a headache. Honestly, I knew how much she didn't want to move, so I was doing my best to make sure that she was comfortable. Understand that I didn't force her to move. She didn't want to, but she did because my new employment came with almost double the pay, and it would have been stupid not to take it. It's not like her family was in another continent, and she understood that much. She also eventually got a job in retail, and she seemed to not hate it, which was a win in itself. I worked remotely previously, but the new job had me coming in 3 days a week, and I'd be back home relatively late on those days. All the same, I always tried to make sure that she was comfortable, and that wasn't too hard for me. I loved this girl back then, so there was little I wouldn't have done for her. The problem started one day when I got back home and noticed a little piece of plastic on the floor near my bedside table. If you know what the flavor packets inside instant ramen look like, it looked like the corner was torn off one of those. There was some branding on it, but it was cut off, so I generally couldn't figure out what it was. Instant ramen was the first thing to come to my stupid head, but soon after that, I suddenly started thinking about condoms. It could be from one of those, but we didn't use condoms, so that didn't make any sense to me. Honestly, it was very hard to convince myself that it was cheating that was going on. She didn't seem to have the mental disposition to cheat. Maybe that sounds harsh, but it is kind of how I see things. I think you need to be very sharp and somewhat unremorseful to cheat successfully. I could be entirely wrong though. The thing is, I don't want to worry my head about something that might have been far from the truth, so I just asked her right away what I was holding, but she seemed to be as clueless as I was. I actually think that she couldn't recognize what it was, same as me. But that didn't make me feel better, because it didn't mean that she wasn't cheating. At the same time though, I didn't worry too much. But I did make a mental note that I was going to do some snooping if the opportunity fell into my lap. I think weeks went by after that, and somehow I completely forgot about my mild suspicions. I guess that's what happens when they're mild enough. It's easy just to shrug them off. Unfortunately, the real problem started when I found an empty condom wrapper underneath the bed. This one had the whole edge torn off, and it wasn't dusty or anything, so there was no convincing me it was there before we moved in. We furnished the apartment ourselves, and I'm sure I would have noticed a used condom wrapper on the floor of the bedroom. Honestly, I had to really think as to whether there might have been a point when we used a condom, but I was so sure there wasn't. The way I felt in that moment genuinely sucked because I had what was basically proof of a cheating wife, but I still didn't feel sure enough. You might call me stupid because that was all the proof I really needed, but maybe you have no idea how denial can be. I just wanted to be proved wrong in that moment, more than I really ever have in my life. I didn't tell her what I had found at that point, and I still haven't. I've kept it to myself. I got the confirmation I was looking for anyway because I eventually checked on her account on Twitter. I refuse to call it X, since that was her most used social media app. I don't use it though. so it must have always felt like a safe space for her. It explains why she was busy flirting with a certain guy that appeared in every single one of her comments. That was what led me to grab her phone when I got the chance and go through her DMs with the same guy on Twitter. The conversation was incredibly lewd. Honestly, it was more explicit than I had ever known her to be, and she clearly had some kinks that she was too shy to expose to me. That part pissed me off because I've always been open in the bedroom, but apparently those parts of her could be exposed to someone who wasn't her husband. There was a lot of messages there that very clearly pointed to the fact that the two of them had slept together. She had cheated on me with this guy. Or more like she still is, because it clearly wasn't a one-time thing between them. At least him. How can I know how many more there are? I learned to document the evidence from my time here. So I took as many pictures as I could. It'll come in handy when I go to see a divorce lawyer. So that's essentially it. I know that my wife is cheating on me, and it honestly breaks my heart. I'm also somewhat bewildered by the whole thing because I never really thought she had the mental fortitude for something as sleazy as this, but I guess you never really know people. I was stupid thinking that in the first place, so you all don't need to tell me that. I'm not going to confront her. I'm just going to find a lawyer and get the papers served to her. I'm not going to waste time getting all of this done because I genuinely can't bear being in the same house as her any longer. Edit. I've gotten a very good lawyer. He certainly costs a lot more than I'd like to pay anybody, but I want the job done quickly, smoothly, and as much in my favor as it can be. So it's worth the money right now, especially if he can save my butt in alimony. I'm sorry, OP. Finding the empty condom wrapper and then stumbling upon the explicit messages must have been gut-wrenching. It's hard to reconcile the person you thought you knew with the reality of what she's been doing behind your back. Consulting a lawyer is a strong step towards reclaiming your life and making sure you're protected moving forward. It's a good idea to document everything you've discovered, as this will be crucial in navigating the divorce process. The final aspect, especially regarding alimony, is something you'll want to be clear about, and it's great that you're being proactive about it. Update. Well, first off, I'm going to say that I'm sorry there hasn't been an update on the story that I dropped here so long ago, with my soft wife who was cheating on me with some guy on Twitter. I shouldn't be apologizing because I was in the hospital. And yes, that's very relevant. The most interesting part of this whole thing was why I was in the hospital, and I think you all are going to like it. At least, I'm trying to find humor in how this entire thing has played out. So, as I mentioned at the end of my last post months ago, I was able to get a lawyer. We talked, I paid the retainer, and he had the divorce papers ready for me very shortly after. He was efficient, which was good because that retainer still stings when I think about it. My life literally changed on the day that I decided to serve this woman the divorce papers. I didn't confront her with the cheating. I just went up to her when she was sitting on the couch and watching a show, and I handed her the envelope. She looked at it with a very confused look on her face, and then she eventually opened it and took out the papers. I saw the color leave her face when she did that. I noticed that her hands started to shake too, and she started to breathe heavily. For a moment, I was scared that she was going to have a heart attack or something, but then she managed to ask me why. That was when I finally told her everything that I knew, starting from the condom wrapper that I found, then her flirting with the guy on Twitter, and finally, her DMs that I had snuck through. She started to cry and kept saying, "Please," over and over again. It was like it was the only word that she knew at that point. I knew I wasn't going to give in to her pleading. Honestly, as much as I loved her before all of this, it seemed like killing two birds with one stone. I wouldn't need to deal with her being such a wimp anymore. I just kept shaking my head because it was the only thing I could get out without resorting to cursing her out with every expletive in my head. Eventually, she seemed to get tired of crying and just sank to the floor. After some time, I told her to go to the room, pack up some essentials, and then leave. I gave her 15 minutes to do that. While she was doing that, I was sitting on the couch facing the TV. Even though it wasn't on, I was just there with my thoughts, busy beating myself up for every single decision that I had made that had brought me to this point. I kind of zoned out at a point. What brought my attention back was seeing something move in the reflection of the TV, and when I turned to look at what was behind me, and I only saw her holding a knife for a brief second before she stabbed me in the shoulder. Things are extremely blurry for me at this point, and I've been struggling to think of how it went down exactly, but I can't remember the details. Maybe it was the adrenaline in that moment, but I remember that she pulled the knife out and stabbed me again in a smaller spot. Then I managed to stand up, and I think I tried to climb over the back of the couch to get to her, and that was the point when I think she got me in the abdomen. At that point, I hit the ground, and all I remember after that was dragging myself to the phone to call 911. I don't know what point she ran out of the house after I fell. I just remember dialing 911. I can't remember the conversation or whether I was even able to say anything before I passed out. She stabbed me 3 times, twice in the upper back and around my shoulder, and once in the abdomen. It sounds like one of those movie scenes, but yeah, I woke up in the hospital and it was extremely disorienting because it took me almost 10 minutes to recollect why I could have been there. One lesson I learned during my days in the hospital is never to trust anyone ever again. Also, don't judge a book by its cover, because it is the same woman that I've seen barf because of blood that somehow stabbed me 3 times and made me lose almost 2 liters of blood. I had a lot of time to think about it though, and honestly, I think her disposition is part of the reason why all that happened. It's like me surprising her with the paper just made her snap, and she felt like killing me was going to save her from the consequences, because she was definitely trying to kill me. The first stab she made was for the back of my neck, but when I looked back, I threw her off. That was literally what saved my life, because maybe I would have been too messed up to even call 911 had she gotten what she was going for. It was attempted murder, and honestly, up until today, I know how fortunate I am to be alive. It was funny how quickly my concern went from getting divorced from a cheating wife to staying alive and then to making sure that she got locked up. And thankfully, that last part eventually came my way. She wasn't very smart. She went straight home to her mother to hide out instead of going someplace else. It wasn't hard for the police to locate her, obviously, and her mother didn't try to hide her. Of all of her charges, the most appealing to me is obviously the attempted murder charge. I really didn't care so much about the divorce at that point, though I was certainly going to see it through. It was while she was awaiting trial that we finalized things there. My lawyer had to completely amend his terms of the divorce. He felt like we might have had the best chance by offering alimony and taking everything else, but now he wanted everything. She hadn't been found guilty or anything at that point, but the new development was obviously going to work in my favor. Needless to say, it did. A cheating and murderous ex-wife doesn't deserve to be rewarded in any way, shape, or form. I cried the day that things were officially over between us. It's the first time I've cried in a long time. I think it all came down to how much I had to live through because of her. Things went to trial and I had to testify and sit in court and do all that stuff. So you'll have to forgive me that it took so long for me to come and write this update. But I had extremely important things going on in my life, and the last thing I was thinking at that point was this website. No offense, I love you all. She was on trial for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and assault with a deadly weapon. At the start of the trial, my lawyer, referred by my divorce lawyer, told me that the attempted murder charge would likely be 50-50, but he was certain we'd get the other ones. He said it'd be the most difficult to prove to a jury that the stabs were intended to kill me. I had to testify in court and sit through one of too many extremely boring days, but we finally got to the end of it all one day. She was found guilty of second-degree attempted murder, aggravated assault, and assault with a deadly weapon. Yep, all 3 charges. I felt so much relief in that moment, and it's kind of silly how the first thing I wanted to do was sink into my bed and take a nap. She got 10 years for it. My attorney was disappointed in that, but it seemed the judge didn't want to throw away the key on her. All I know is that 10 years is long enough for her to not to be my problem anymore. She's not my wife any longer, and by the time she's out of prison, I'll have settled into my new life, whatever that might be. I hope she enjoys prison, though. I'd pay a lot to see how her weak disposition is going to make her through 10 years of that. Maybe this was the secret to getting her to be tough all along. Anyway, to everyone reading this, I don't know what final message I should leave you all with. Trust nobody, not even a wife, and try not to get stabbed or something. The entire thing wasn't worth it to me, but what has happened, and now I'm just going to try and move on. First and foremost, I'm incredibly relieved to hear that you're alive and on the other side of such a traumatic experience. It's clear that her actions were a direct response to the truth coming to light, and it's troubling how far she was willing to go to avoid facing the consequences. The fact that she was found guilty on all charges is a huge relief, even if the sentence wasn't what you and your lawyer hoped for. 10 years is still a significant amount of time, and it's good to know that she's going to be held accountable for her actions. You deserve the peace of mind that comes with knowing she won't be a part of your life moving forward. Do you have a similar story? You're not alone. Share your bad breakups with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.